It's been a few weeks since our last IVF update, and so today's video is going to be all about what's been going on, including the medications I've been taking, how many follicles are in there, and how much it's been costing us.
Hi, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Tasha with One Big Happy Life, and we make videos about how to find balance, build wealth, and live happy. So if you are all about creating a life that you love on your own terms, then we make videos just for you. So you should go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
So if you are new to the channel, we are undergoing IVF treatment because we want to have one more baby, maybe one more baby, and we'll see. And it has taken us a really long time, so we are at that point where we're doing IVF, and we're in the process of a cycle right now and having lots of appointments. Mainly Tasha has been having tons of appointments, tons of medications, and so we're going to go through exactly what's going on right now.
Okay, so when we last left off, we had just finished doing all of the preliminary testing and stuff. So if you need that background, we'll drop a link to the playlist with the other videos in this series. So what happened was that once all of the testing was done and we had our game plan in place, then it was just waiting for my next menstrual cycle to start because I would start birth control pills 2 to 3 days after the start of my period. And it just so happens that the start of my period coincided with our trip to London. So we coordinated with my doctor and I got my prescription, my birth control prescription before we went so that I was able to start birth control while we were in London.
And then like that all went okay. And at once we were a little bit concerned about the time difference because, the birth control has to be taken at the exact same time. And then once we got back, that's when we kind of had another conversation with the doctor to really line up, well, here are all the meds. And there was a lot of interaction between us, the doctor's office, and also the special pharmacy where these drugs are actually given out. And it is complicated.
Yeah, so the way it works is you're supposed to do your course of birth control, which can be 2 to 4 weeks of birth control, and then you start your next period, and then you start your medications. Well, I got to the end of my birth control pills. We're gearing up to start medications within the next 4 days, and the stuff still hadn't been straightened out with my insurance and the pharmacy. And what was especially difficult was, and so the doctor wasn't able to send the prescription over. Like, I don't even remember why. Do you remember why they weren't able to send the prescription over right away?
I know that they wanted certain paperwork. Like, we had to make sure that all of their paperwork was signed. In fact, some of it had to be notarized.
Yeah.
And so there was that, and I think they wouldn't send it in until they had all of that. Oh, and we also had the question, we wanted to know how much it was going to cost before we actually got the order. And it's basically impossible, at least with our doctor and this pharmacy, to do that.
The doctor then sent the prescription in. And so we're calling the pharmacy and we're like, okay, well, how much is this going to cost? And they're like, well, we can't really tell you because we need to consult with your insurance first. And I'm like, well, how much does it cost without insurance? And they're like, well, we're not really sure. I'm like, how do you not know this? So that was extremely frustrating. And really, when we were supposed to be starting our cycle. And so we finally decided, we're like, okay, well, we know that the most the medication could cost was somewhere between $5,000 and $8,000 because that was the range that the doctor's office gave us. And so we're like, okay, well, the most that we'll have to pay for this medication is $5,000. So we just said, look, whatever, let's just hope this all works out. And the most important thing was to get the medication on time so that I could start. Because if I wasn't able to start within that time period, like there was a little bit of wiggle room within a day or two, but then I would have had to go on birth control for another month again. So that would have been really frustrating. But luckily it all worked out.
I mean, at the end of the day, the question was, well, almost regardless of the cost, would we proceed anyway? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question was yes, because we knew that we wanted to do IVF, and IVF does cost a lot. And so it's like, well, unless it was just something unbelievably way out there that we weren't expecting, the answer was going to be yes. We will suck it up. We will pay this.
Okay, so here's how the timeline went. And I'm going to be looking down at my notes because it's a lot happens in a surprisingly short period of time. So I got my period 4 days after stopping birth control. And I had my lab work and my baseline ultrasound that same day. So they wanted to make sure that everything was like mellow and the uterine lining was thin and, that the birth control had basically done its job. So then the next day, which was 5 days after finishing birth control, I started the medication. So the paperwork for the medication got finalized the day that I was originally supposed to start medication. So they weren't able, so they had to ship it out that day, next day air, and we got it the following day. So I actually started a day after I was supposed to start.
And it came in a gigantic box. Some of it was ice pack, but it was a huge box. Yeah. And it was intimidating for me, and I'm not even going to take all those shots as we were pulling them all out.
So I'll talk a little bit more about the exact medications and how much I got a little bit later when we actually break down some prices for you guys. But I'll just tell you, I started meds on that 5th day after stopping birth control, and I was taking 250 units of Follistim a day and 150 units of Menopur a day. And so those are aimed at getting the ovaries to produce a lot of follicles. So then monitoring started. So my first monitoring appointment was on day 4 of meds. There were 8 bigger follicles, and there was one that was really big that was around 12 millimeters. And I was so disappointed because the cycle before, when I wasn't medicated and was having all of those ultrasounds just on a natural cycle, I had 24 follicles. So I was just really, really sad. I was also really, really tired. By day 4 of the medication, I was just exhausted. It was really hard for me to stay awake for a whole work day.
Yeah, so after that appointment, Tasha calls me and says, or trying to, tell me kind of how it went, and I forgot her exact phrasing.
I could tell you.
Okay, what was the exact phrase?
It was like, do you want to know how many follicles there were? That was the exact phrasing.
And this is what I do. So I love to guess, but I guess at all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I'm a good guesser, but sometimes it's just not the time to guess.
Most of the time. Joseph likes to, we all hate, so let's just add that everyone in the family hates Joseph's guessing because he tries to guess surprises. He doesn't guess just when he's invited. He guesses when he's not invited, and you deliberately don't want him to guess. So that's the backstory on that.
Yeah, so I made a guess because I knew that previously she had 24 follicles. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to guess one more than that, expecting that, she's going to be that's going to be more. Anyway, so I guessed 25. And of course, she's all nervous because she only had 8 bigger ones.
I'm not nervous. I am devastated. I am in emotional dire straits. Like, I am pretty much in tears. Okay. Though he doesn't know because we're not together, but I am just on this emotional roller coaster that was really unexpected because I don't normally get big swings of emotion like that anyway.
Yeah, so I'm doing the worst thing possible. And then she's like, no. And then so I guess again, which is obviously the worst next thing to do. And yeah, so it just went downhill because she was just completely devastated and I was just making it worse. And so
I'm in my car crying because I'm like, how could you guess that? And you're putting so much pressure on me. And he's like, well, I'm sorry for guessing. Like, such a typical guy response. So needless to say, we actually had a pretty big fight about that. We made up, obviously, but
I really don't know about big fight, but
it felt big to me. I mean, it's true. It's not like it was like a knockdown, drag out fight. I hate you. This is the end. Like, but I mean, we don't fight that much. So, and it was over something, under normal circumstances, he guesses all the time and we don't typically get into big fights about it. But it just goes to show you that this is a really emotional time. So for the women that are watching this, just expect that emotionally, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be stressful. I really wasn't expecting it. Like I'm good at performing under stress pretty well. And so like it surprised me just how emotional it made me. But for the guys who were watching it, like understand that you're going to have to start supporting your partner, or not just guys, but for the partners who are watching this, understand that you're going to have to start supporting your partner emotionally, like right at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I just have to say, like, realistically, it's like the whole process is so much more difficult for women to go through than men. Like, there's only so much that they can do with male infertility issues, and IVF pretty much just solves all the male issues. I mean, almost entirely. And so it's like, well, once you're doing it, then you're just kind of done. And so that makes it really easy on our part. But there's so much more involved, even if it's a male factor infertility, the woman still has to go through this whole cycle. So that's a big deal.
Also, I've been shooting myself up with injections, 2 a day now for 4 days. So on that day, my estrogen was 468. Then the very next day, I decided that at the end of the workday, I was going to take the rest of the cycle off so that I just wouldn't have the stress. And I was expecting that I would be working throughout the cycle and just taking off for appointments. But it was really frustrating for me because like the people at my office knew that I would be going through this, and they would still want to schedule meetings and like want me to hammer down a time when I could schedule a meeting, like just a random standing meeting, not like, oh, we have this pressing project that we need to move forward, like just a random, hey, let's check in. And I'm like, I don't know for sure when I'm going to be in the office. So I would rather wait until I'm in the office and then we see if there's something that we can coordinate. And it just, in the midst of all the other kind of emotional turmoil and the fatigue that I was feeling, I just decided that the best thing that I could do for like my mental health, my physical health, my stress level was to just take off of work. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind if you're thinking of going through IVF, that you may want to consider taking some time off of work if your workplace is somewhat kind of demanding of you.
Yeah, because the monitoring started every 2 days, and then once you get closer, then it'll go to every single day that you have an appointment, including weekends, if it's going through a weekend. Okay, so what were your results for second monitoring?
So the second monitoring appointment, my estrogen was at 1383, and they counted 43 follicles. 25 of them were 9 millimeters or bigger. So obviously there was this nice big jump. Oh, I forgot to mention, at the end of that first appointment, they had me start where I had that one follicle that was really big. They had me start ganirelix, which is, so that's a third medication. It's taken in the mornings, shot inside of you in the mornings, and it prevents ovulation. So because there was this one follicle that was so much bigger than everyone else, they had to slow that one down. So I was up to now 3 shots a day.
And then you had another 2 days because nothing was going too fast. Another 2 days. 2 days later, had more monitoring.
Yes, and then an appointment on my 8th day of medication. And on that appointment, they found 8 mature follicles, meaning that they were 16 millimeters or bigger. And there were an additional 19 follicles that were 12 millimeters or bigger. And then we had another appointment the next day. And at this point, Joseph's coming with me. So in the 4th monitoring appointment, we had 15 mature follicles and then another 15 that were 13 millimeters or bigger. So ideally, we'll want them to be 16 millimeters or bigger in order to maximize the chances that they'll have a mature egg in them.
But at least our doctor, and I assume all the doctors, try to get every single follicle they see regardless of the size. Like if they can get it, they try. Because the more eggs they can get at once, the less likely that Tasha will have to go through all of this again.
So then on day 9 of medications, that was that monitoring appointment that I just mentioned. That day they said, okay, we're going to trigger you and we're going to retrieve the eggs in 2 days. So that was Saturday. I had my first trigger shot Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. And that was this lupritide acetate injection right here. And then we had another appointment the next morning to check my blood to make sure that injection went okay. And then I had another shot this morning at 9:30, so Sunday morning. And then my egg retrieval surgery is Monday morning.
Yeah, so when it comes down to the end, it goes really fast. And so she's going to go under general anesthesia for the surgery. And then I have to, do my only part and supply a sample to fertilize those eggs, however many they get. And
No, he's got two parts. Your second part, so he's got to give them a sample, and then your second part is to take care of me for 2 days afterwards. So I'm really looking forward to. They're like, you just have to pamper her. You got to give her whatever she needs. I'm like, yes, that is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so when I was thinking about exactly how large all those follicles are inside her, like when you think about it, okay, so like a 20 millimeter follicle, that's like a 3/4 of an inch follicle. And so she's got a whole bunch of them. So it's like grapes, like a little bunch of grapes in there, when normally it would be like very small.
Yeah, so I definitely feel very full, just kind of achy, no real pain beyond the actual shots themselves, but that might be a bit of an anomaly because first of all, the doctor was like, even my ovaries are overachievers, so that was hilarious. But the nurse was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm just tired. Like I'm tired all the time. No matter how much I sleep, I'm tired. And so it was really good that I took off of work, because then throughout the day I slept whenever I wanted to sleep. And so to have that kind of flexibility and to just be able to like rest and relax was just awesome.
Well, fingers crossed that the egg retrieval goes well tomorrow and there are no complications with that. Now, we have calculated the costs up to now, and it is $5,250.
And he means our out-of-pocket costs, not what the charges have been.
Right.
Because our insurance does cover some of this stuff.
Oh, and that is also not including insurance premiums, correct?
Yes,
because
does not include insurance
Because we
premiums.
went out knowing that we were going to do IVF, got an additional health insurance policy that does cover it for this year, because we knew that we would need the coverage, and neither of our policies cover it.
So we're going to have another video where we go over the final total, because we can only tell you how much we have paid out of pocket up to this point, which includes everything basically up to the retrieval and the fertilization of the eggs. So that, and then after that, we'll have the actual implantation of the eggs, and that's going to be another set of charges. So we paid $4,800 directly to the doctor, and that covers the surgical suite, anesthesia, and the PGS testing, and basically all of the monitoring, all of that. The surgical suite is technically out of network, as is the anesthesiologist. So we prepay for that, and then we'll submit that to our insurance ourselves and hopefully get reimbursed some of that. And then the PGS testing is to test the embryos to make sure that they're chromosomally normal. And that is typically not covered by insurance. And that was $3,000 something just by itself. So that money, like, we just knew we were going to have to at least pay that.
We paid $450 for the medications, and they would have been $6,000 without that insurance.
Okay, and let me list how much medication we got. Okay, so Follistim, this is a 900 unit kind of pen that you inject yourself with. We got 6 of these. And then Menopur, we got 6 of these, which are the 75 IU 5-dose containers. And then Ganirelix, we got, I think, 6 of these. Yes. And this is the thing that stops you from ovulating. And then we got 1 of these trigger shots, which is a multi-dose vial on the inside. So I had 2 shots from here, and I pulled them out from the same vial. And I actually still have almost half of the medication left. So we could go through another cycle and only need a little bit more. Well, I'd need a whole new set of the suppression ones to stop me from ovulating. But we'd only need a little bit more of the Follistim and the Menopur, because my dose stayed the same throughout my whole cycle. Normally, when you start to suppress the ovulation, you need to bump up the other ones to make sure the eggs keep developing. But my body just kept reacting properly even after starting this. So I stayed on a pretty low dose of meds throughout the entire cycle. So that was kind of awesome.
Okay, so that's where we are right now, and we're gonna do at least one more video with like the next steps because we're still going.
Yeah, and
So,
follow us on Instagram for real-time updates. Because if you follow us on Instagram, then you kind of saw all these things happening over the past few weeks when they were happening.
all right, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.